Hello, I'm Laura Furiosi, divorced mother of 3, and I'm here with my mother, Lynette Galvin, with 35 years' experience in family law. You're listening to the Divorce Course podcast. Through our candid discussions, we hope to help you through your divorce or de facto separation. We will be answering the most commonly asked questions and covering the stages and steps that you will face on your way to freedom. Do you know what post-separation abuse is? Some people, after they have separated from their partner, find out that the abuse continues. And today we're going to be talking about what is identified as post-separation abuse and what you can do about it, covering things from legal abuse, financial abuse, counter-parenting, alienation allegations, neglectful parenting, and coercive control, isolation and harassment and stalking. Today, we're going to make sure that you don't feel alone, and we're going to talk to you about what you can do about it. This information, the post-separation abuse summary, we've taken from a website called One Mum's Battle, which if you are not following yet and you are suffering from post-separation abuse, I'd strongly recommend you check it out. Thank you, Mum, so much for coming along today. How are you?
I'm well. How are you, Laura?
I'm struggling to get my words out today.
And hello, everyone.
But thank you, Mum, for coming. Now, today we've noticed there's been a lot of triggering things in the news lately, and there's been deaths in Australia that have broken our hearts, and there have been deaths in America as well recently. And One Mum's Battle, who this lady that I do follow on Instagram, and this post-separation abuse wheel has been created by her, she is highlighting that the fact that this is quite widespread, and people need to be aware of what's happening to them and how to counteract it. And I am really sorry for what's been happening recently to these people in Australia and overseas. And it's a real pandemic, I think. And hopefully this episode, if you are going through it, you're not going to feel alone, and maybe you'll identify some things that will make you feel a little bit more, okay, this is what I'm experiencing. I'm not going crazy.
Yes.
Mum, what are your thoughts on post-separation abuse and what's going on?
And I agree, absolutely. It's probably not recognised enough by lawyers and judges, but it's beginning to be. It's part of the coercive control thing, I think. And I feel I must say today we've had a man murdered by a woman, and that is absolutely as much domestic violence as the lady being murdered. It's just terrible. And our police are not up to speed, at least in this country. By talking about it, by identifying it, we will make it a thing. Can refer to the studies and bring it to the attention of anyone who'll listen about it. And you might need to be saying to your lawyer, hey, I think I'm being abused post-separation through these ways, and you'll see that some of the abuse that we're going to talk about actually makes you look like you're in the wrong. It's very clever, and it's hard to overturn. So let's go.
It does seem to be a pattern, and it seems to it's kind of like same with the narcissist. How you can see a pattern of how the divorce is going to go.
The playbook.
This post separation abuse seems to be similar in the playbook as well. So, talking through it, let's have a look. So, let's start with coercive control, which is part of post separation abuse. So, even though you've left, they can create a sense of fear in all elements of your life, and it also talks about belittling, undermining, shaming, criticising you, strategically manipulating your family and friends or community, and imposing a false sense of narrative to make you doubt your reality or your memory or your perceptions. So, Mum, is that something that you can prove in court?
It's very hard. No, it's not. A lot of it, the relationships that this person damages are damaged forever. They really try post-separation abuse to get to your family first and make your family think that you're mad. And you know why it works? It works because when you are in a domestic violence relationship with coercive control, you either don't recognise it because you're not being hit, or you don't talk about it because you feel it's disloyal to your partner. So when your partner rings up your mum, dad, sisters and says, I don't know what's happened with her, she's gone crazy, she's run out of the house, yada, yada, he's recruited them onto his side, and they're saying, well, we didn't see any evidence of what you're talking about now in the marriage, or in the relationship.
And why didn't you mention it before?
Yes.
Like I'm your mum, why haven't you told me? Or I'm your sister or my best friend, why haven't you told? We're best friends, why haven't you said something? So I guess that's
true. Why
true.
Didn't you leave? Why didn't you leave? I would have left as soon as that, they just don't understand. They just don't understand.
So that false narrative and that manipulating of your family can really make you feel quite isolated, and that is another part of post-separation abuse, which is isolation, where they might spread lies and rumours to families, friends, even maybe the school.
In the church, school, any community that you're both in, soccer clubs, I've seen it, where they recruit people onto their side and you're on the outer. You can't go to church anymore. You can't go to soccer. The mothers don't talk to you at school because they've formed this view based on, and they play the victim very well. A manipulative and controlling person or an abuser can play the victim very well. So, that leads to isolation. And sometimes the only friends you've got are the people who weren't involved in the marriage, like didn't have anything to do with you during the marriage. And thankfully there's usually a lot of those, because when they see what a jerk your partner is, they stop coming around. and your partner may have been quietly discouraging them, and you might have retreated from your friends because he didn't like them and you were getting peace at any price. So instead of isolation, embrace the opportunity to go back to your genuine friends. But yes, anything that you did together, and this starts very quickly after separation while you're still grieving. They're out there manoeuvring and sorting things so that,
And I think that's with the isolation, I think it's important to note that also that comes down to perhaps professional isolation. So, if your children were attending a certain doctor or GP that's become aware of the situation, they'll try and move them to another one. I've heard that story. Maybe try and change the school so they don't have to deal with the school because maybe the school's aware of the situation. So they just try and, in that isolation process, try and really just take everything that you've had as a support system on the children's support system and rip it out, and just so that there's that isolation and that, I don't know if the aim of post-separation abuse is to get you back or whether the aim of post-separation abuse is to just make you suffer,
punish,
hurt them.
Punish you.
Yes, but whatever that is, the isolation and taking away your support systems, the best way to fight it is to insist on your children attending the places that they used to attend, maybe get that in the court orders that you have the same GPs, the same netball teams, the same school, and also go and if you want to challenge the narrative that's been put out there, go out there and just say, you know what, actually that's not true.
Tell your truth.
And if they don't accept that, then like Mum said, go and find new friends, create new friends. But don't just give up and walk away with your tail between your legs, because you need that support system.
Well, also, if you do walk away, and dignity, holding your head high with dignity and just not dealing with them, can sometimes lend support to his narrative or her narrative until after a while they realise what a jerk she is or he is. But
which leads to, I guess, harassment and stalking, which is the next one, because I guess one of the things you just want to do is, I've heard from people, is just get away from it. So, if they are at the school talking to all the school mums and you're standing there, you don't want to be there. You want to get away as far as you can. So that stalking and harassment comes into play where they're, standing there where you are with any social interactions, going to the same social places you go to.
Sending you things, signing you up for things. I remember a case years ago, and my client was a male, not that matters particularly, but the lady kept subscribing him to things off the back of magazines like Franklin Mint stuff. So he had the gold set of Scrabble, and then she signed him up to decorated thimbles using his credit card and these passes. But the most distressing thing for him was not that he got stuck with this women's Scrabble set worth hundreds or the thimbles coming every month. It was that it was her way of intruding on his life, and that was very hard for him to bear. So you don't
That's
want
right.
reminders popping up all of the time.
No, and they want you to be thinking about them. So I guess that's when, if you do have children, that the family parenting platforms like Our Children, Our Family Wizard, and a couple of other things that, they can only message you. If you can get a court order that says they only message you on that platform, it stops the overwhelm from text messages, phone calls, emails.
Yes.
Because I do know some people who actually have, because of post-separation abuse, they actually have trauma from checking their text messages and checking their emails, which affects your life moving forward. You need to get that sorted out. So the best way is to put all that abuse in a box and log in when you can deal with it, when you need to.
Chocolate.
That's one way to deal with that constant harassment. Yeah. When it comes to stalking, Mum, if you think your ex is stalking you, if you know your ex is stalking you through either social media or through, spyware or following you in the car,
or having someone else.
What should our listeners do about that?
Report that to the police.
Okay.
And tell the ex that you know that they're doing it and what you've done about it.
Okay. Now, I'm going to be really honest here, and we do TikToks and Instagram, and we did a TikTok about reporting your abuse to police. Yeah. And it's gone crazy because the stories people put on there are basically, I told the police they don't care. I've told the police I don't care. That's the story that goes over and over and over again. And I'm just going to call it. So if you're out there, your ex is stalking you or harassing you, and you've told the police and they've basically fobbed you off and said, I don't care, you're not alone.
No.
But we all have to stand up and we all have to keep fighting. So don't back off.
Absolutely. Go back.
The police can't hurt you.
Get back.
The police aren't going to hurt you. You go back.
And get their badge number, ask for their rank and name, ask to speak to their superior, ask for your complaint to be recorded. And we're publishing this in Queensland, Australia, where there is a suggestion that some police may be subject to crime and corruption inquiries if they don't take positive steps for domestic violence, because we're losing too many people too often. And so I heard our commissioner say that domestic violence was approximately 40% of their call-outs. I mean, it is core business now, and they need to understand what they're dealing with. So
and it's up to I mean, I'm not saying like we're a customer, but in the business mindset that I have, if your customers are constantly telling you that your service is crap, you're going to change. And so it's our job as people to go, and if we do report things to the police and they don't listen, it's your job to complain and make it, Karen up, be angry, because this needs to change. And it could very well, your complaint, save somebody else's life if the police officer gets re-educated and then they come against somebody else who has a problem. You could save somebody else's life by making a complaint.
Well, Laura, 36 years ago, 1984, I think that's 36 years ago, is it? But anyway...
Maths. Sorry, Ma. I didn't pay attention.
1980, maybe 1988. But I think 1983, the Domestic Violence Act first came into being. And actually, no, that was 89, first came into being. And I remember there was nothing before that. And, in fact, police wouldn't go to a matter if you called them up and told them something, and I've had them say that to me as a lawyer about my client, we're not going, it's a domestic matter, we're not involved in that. When the legislation was introduced, the first family court domestic violence legislation, that was groundbreaking, and it was only because of the really intense advocacy of some of the women's legal groups that this legislation was even thought about. So we can, as a group of people, consistently voice our concern, and it will cause change. The only thing that won't change is if you don't say anything, nothing will change. But if all of us together don't take no for an answer, and constantly reported. And then now we're getting pressure from the government down that they have to record it. There'll be protocols, I'm sure. And the thing is, coercive control is only really proven to the courts by numerous small and consistent events. So they've tried to make it a crime in some states, and the police have said it's the easiest thing to prove, because coercive control is the sort of abuse that continues after separation. Because you've physically removed yourself from the person. They have to mind how they speak to you, but there's all these other avenues, like legal abuse, Laura.
That's right, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. And I think, just in case you are listening and you're thinking, I'm dealing with a nightmare at the moment, the last thing I need is to just be using my energy to stand up to the police, and I totally get that. If you don't have the energy,
don't do it.
But maybe go back later once all this is over and stand up to them then, so that perhaps we can help others. And I think that's the important part. Women and men who are going through this, if you can't stand up to them now, just remember it and go back later.
Write it down and go back with your diary, yes. Yeah. And those of us who can stand up, we should do it on behalf of the men and women who are just in too bad a place at the moment.
I agree. Yeah. So, Mum, like you mentioned, legal abuse. So, post-separation abuse, one of the coercive control elements, I guess, is this legal abuse, where they're using court proceedings, threatening court, ignoring court orders, deliberately causing delays in court proceedings, making legal threats, seeking a change in custody to get revenge on you. So, I know you've come across that as a lawyer. I guess you see, do judges look at it and go, okay, it's like, for example, maybe a parent might say, I want the child all of the time, and that person never see them. Do they see that as post-separation abuse?
No, because it doesn't look any different to the legitimate use of the court and their systems. Only after a period of time, because like it's in that realm of coercive control, so it's the pattern that begins to develop, but it takes a long time. Disregarding court orders, they'll hardly do that because there are consequences. So it's generally the more nuanced stuff, like if they commit domestic violence, they quickly go to the police and report you for domestic violence, tell them that you're crazy, and by the time you get in there, you've got police going, oh, it's you. Or you call your mother for support and they go, oh, you're the mother, and they've already formed a view because they've been sucked right in with this manipulative person. So the court proceedings, some awful people would rather spend the money on lawyers than stop fighting. And at least while they're bringing application after application and forcing you to go to court, they're getting your attention. And they know where you're going to be on a particular day, and they get to heap more abuse on you. And they do tell terrible lies under oath with no care.
Like so, in their affidavits.
In their affidavits and things. And then for your point, from your point of view, when all you can say is, no, it didn't. That didn't happen. No, it didn't.
Yeah.
And you seldom have evidence to prove to the contrary.
Sorry to interrupt this episode, but we have a really important announcement that very well might just help you out. Currently in the family court, do you currently have a family lawyer? Come along to our new free webinar called How to Keep Your Costs Down During Family Court Proceedings. Reserve your seat now by clicking the link in our bios on our social media pages, or going into the show notes and clicking on the link. In this webinar, you will learn how to manage your legal costs during your divorce. We walk you through how to actually get your divorce, property and children's settlements sorted without spending thousands of dollars in the court. Mum will also talk you through how to avoid costly pitfalls when hiring lawyers and getting lawyers to do your court documents. If you register for our free webinar to help make your divorce less painful and costly, you'll be able to discover the steps you can take yourself to keep your costs down and not end up with horrible bill shock. Learn from Lynn, a lawyer of 35 years experience. Get some gems of information and set yourself on the right path to your new life. Click on the link and reserve your seat today. Now let's get back to the episode.
Seldom. So it's a true thing. And for the court to rule someone as a vexatious litigant, they really, really have to be extreme. So it's a question of degree, and most people who are doing this to their partners just to keep the fight going, keep the attention on them, cause them grief. They're doing it just under the radar, so it could be interpreted as a legitimate claim or need to go to court. Sorry, though, gosh.
But you have that. I think the family court, the FCFO, what is it? Family Court
Federal Circuit and Family Court of Australia, FCFCOA.
Yeah, which is in short the family court. They basically have changed a lot of their rules for making applications. Do you think now that they're saying you can't have more than how many applications? One?
Oh, it says
is that going to help?
It's normally not more than one, and you have to sort of explain it. It probably can help a little bit, I think. It's just a question of the court identifying what is a malicious application with no hope of success from a legitimate complaint from a person, because they're gaslighting the judges too.
Can I ask you, Mum, if you had a client who was suffering from legal abuse and you knew that it was just misuse of court proceedings and all the stuff that was going on, false reporting, how would you try and present that to the judge? What would you ask your client to do to help you get the evidence or to prove it?
I think I'd ask my client to agree to a psychiatric assessment if the other party would have one as well, because they're not usually normal people who do that. I would, if there's children involved and they can speak for themselves, I'd get a family report, ask them to agree in the family report, do a bit of acting for themselves to keep their costs down.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do say that practice direction you're talking about, the new core principles of this court now are the speedy and cost-effective resolution of disputes. And if I thought the lawyer was being blind to what their client was doing, I would point it out to their lawyer and point out to the lawyer that the lawyer has an obligation to make sure that it's a good use of the court's time and that they're not just a gullible mouthpiece. As the court has said, the lawyers are not gullible mouthpieces. So if you can't get your other party to stop, maybe you can point out to the lawyer the risk they're running if they keep taking their client at face value.
Okay. Okay. Now, the other parts of post-separation abuse, unfortunately, apart from financial, which we all know about and we'll talk about a little bit in a minute, but a lot of it can be the kids, using the kids, because that's like kicking you in the feels because your kids are your everything. Yeah. So, there's the one mum's battle is described counter-parenting, neglectful or abusive parenting, and then the kicker, parental alienation allegations. So let's cover neglectful or abusive parenting. So maybe they expose the children to unsafe situations. They create fear about the other parent. They use violence, intimidations, manipulations to get the kids to agree to what they want, and they put their needs above others. I mean,
their
above
own needs.
The child.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess that is terrible post-separation abuse. How do you counter that? What if someone's dealing with that now? How do you counter that?
Yes. Well, Laura, that's a hard question.
Sorry, Mel.
I was going to say I've seen situations like that where one had the kids kite surfing when they were very young and or a girl taking the children up on a light aircraft when the other parent was terrified of light aircrafts, stuff like that. How do you deal with it? You name it. You write the letter. You say this wasn't acceptable. You did this. You've left them in the pub while you've gone drinking. Just name it all and say if it happens again, you're going straight to court to change the orders. If they use violence, intimidation, threat and ridicule of you to the children, that is just as bad as anything else they can do. And you name it. You type a letter, send a letter, and make it in bold, underlined, with inverted commas, the words they are alleged to have said, and dot point each lot so that it looks even worse. And so they know they can say these things because you can't stop them if they're with the children. But if the children report it, it's going to come back to them. If they've got a lawyer, write that letter to their lawyer. And an abusive parent really does place their needs above the kids. So you'll often find they'll drag the kids from pillar to post for whatever activity they want to do, or they might be more about taking the children off you than having time themselves. So if you pick up that the kids are spending time at a girlfriend's place or something and he's not there, name that as well. I think it's just like shining a torch on that sort of crap behaviour. And
I guess if you've been in a coercive control situation, you're probably not completely used to or comfortable with pointing out bad behaviour of your ex.
Yes.
If you've constantly been in an abusive relationship, it could be very hard to say, hey, I don't like what you're doing, because probably for 15 years or 25 years, you've always just kept your mouth shut because you want to keep the peace, and you're afraid that maybe if you point it out, you're going to get some sort of, backlash. So I know what Mum's saying sounds easy, but maybe you are thinking, oh, I don't want to do that because that might really upset them. But in this situation, you are separated. If you're in a safe place, you need to stand up for your kids, don't you, Mum? And I think naming it puts it in a document that if you do go to court, you can show the judge or the family report writer.
I think that's right. By writing the letter, you are highlighting what they've said, and they know that anything else they say is probably going to be giving the same treatment. So they may not ease off on the abuse with the children or the alienation of the children because they realise that's quite the wrong thing to do. Oh, my God, what was I doing to my own darling children? No, but they'll ease off because they can't get away with it anymore. And I don't know that in a marriage where one person's really controlling and manipulative and awful, the other parent generally is the buffer for the kids and the protector for the kids. You leave when you can't stand it anymore, but that means the children don't have a buffer unless you continue that role by writing and standing up for them.
Yeah. Now, and then that comes to counter-parenting as another post-separation abuse, and this is terrible. And I guess undermining your safe parenting decisions, withholding consent of medical treatment, seeking to impose opposing values. So that stuff would be stressful, upsetting, and I can see how some people in a post-separation abuse can be painted as the crazy person, because, if that was happening, I'd be pretty angry and losing my mind that my child was going through this. So what happens how can you stop counter-parenting? Do you just name it as well?
You can. They're very subtle, though. Often it can be something like they join a new church, completely different faith to what you were doing, or they take them bike riding, or they, kite flying or whatever. Again, you can either rail against it and say things, name it, and they will be going, well, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with me taking to church? What's wrong with us, doing this? What's wrong with that? And you might find you don't have support in the legal side. So another way of dealing with it is to embrace it. So if they want the kids sort of to be the world's best tennis players, well, get on in there and join the club, and that's better for the children because you're on board. And a lot of the times they'll do stuff with the kids that the kids really want to do. And if you start saying, oh, I don't want to do that because I've got my reasons, it's easy for them to get the kids to align against you. So embrace what you can. Join that church, play Pokemon, whatever it is that you have to do, so that the kids, because remember, if you're having a tug of war, I've just realised our whole podcast, Laura, is analogies, metaphors. But if you're having a tug of war with the kids, you can just sort of let go of the rope and go over to their side when it's not harmful. If there's no real harm in them going to church or playing football or joining the swimming or whatever, well, maybe make the kids feel better about going by embracing them.
Yeah. Okay. And the last one in that children area of post-separation abuse is this alienation allegations. Now, you've said in a past episode that technically alienation actually isn't a psychological proven thing.
Apparently,
it's not in their little handbook that, they have all the definitions of everything. From post-separation abuse, the abusive parent, there seems to be a trend where the abusive parent makes a claim, the kid doesn't want to go, or the kid doesn't like the parent, probably because they're abusive, but then they, instead of accepting the fact, maybe it's because I'm abusive, they then lay this allegation of alienation.
Yep, that's right.
Which seems to be a cycle and a pattern that just runs through so many people that have reached out to us, and in One Mum's Battle really highlights it, where valid claims of abuse are labelled as alienation. So sometimes people are too afraid to say my kid's getting hurt or my kid's being abused because they're worried that it's going to look like in the court that they're trying to alienate the child. So how do people deal with that?
Okay, so the law used to say that if you were kind of an unfriendly parent, they called it, you weren't promoting the relationship with the other side. That was one of the reasons, one of the ways that the children would be deemed to be less safe with you than with the other, and the best interests of the children not being met. They revoked that part of the legislation, but even so, there's still that lingering stigma that if you're not sending the kids or you say the kids are being abused with their parent, there's that stigma, she's just saying that or he's just saying that so they don't come over. And the alienation kind of scenario is the opposite of lived experience scenario. So when older kids can speak up for themselves, they'll soon say, I don't go to mum's because she hit me or she locked me in my room for 3 days, and people will believe them. It's the little kids that have the trouble. But yes, so it's important to back up your claims somehow if you can. I mean, if there's physical marks on the children, see, they're only non-verbal till 3 or 4, and then they'll report what's going on at the other house, and you just have to be strong. There's when a family report writer or any professional looks at what's happening, they may label you as anxious, over-involved. I think someone made that diagnosis of me once. I was over-involved with my children.
Thanks, Mum. Yeah. I like it.
But an alternative diagnosis of over-involved, an alternative reason is that what you're saying is true. You're not alienated. It's true. It's their lived experience. So you need to maintain, and it will be a lot of pressure, but you maintain your position. There'll be a lot of pressure from the court to reality check you, and it's just a shame that it happens. And kids, the little ones, can't say. It's probably the most complex part of family law and the saddest part.
Now, in that situation, is that what an ICL's job is?
In Australia, an independent children's lawyer could be appointed. They may be sucked in as well because they're only going to be looking at external evidence. But, there might have been a domestic violence application by you at some stage, which will tend to give weight to your side of the story. And, of course, that's why we have contact centres. There are many people who the court's not sure are safe with the children. So put them in the contact centre while they wait for the trial, and then hopefully in the trial things develop. I mean, like I said, post-separation abuse is lovely in some respects is because they can't do it behind closed doors. They can't bully you or hit you or, undermine you privately. If they're going to communicate with you, it has to be in writing. And often someone will slip up and send a text that is abusive, coercive, and just puts that doubt perhaps into the judge's mind or gives credit to what you're saying about this person and how far they would go to put their needs above the kids and to, win against you. It's not about the kids, it's about you. And that turns out to be the case every now and then, and you can prove it.
So you've got to prove that their aim is to control you and to abuse you moving forwards. And I guess you can do that like we've discussed in each little section. So getting the evidence, talking to the police as best you can, and trying to support as much as you can. Don't try and play tug of war too much with the kids and try and really jump on the bandwagon. I have heard some stories where you've suggested that to other people I know, and the minute that person embraced it, the other partner just went, oh, this isn't having the effect I was hoping for. So they just stopped. So
that's a great idea. When do we start?
Yeah, this is too much effort and too much money for me, and it's not seeming to have the effect. So I guess you can also try and control the way that it affects you as well. And financial abuse, of course, you know, the main one that I can think of that it might not be mentioned there, or it is not paying child support.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big one.
And the court looks at that, and that's got equal, like it's one of the ways the court looks at how genuinely someone cares for their children. So often by the time you get to a trial or at some point in between, their behaviour catches up with them, and they don't usually turn into abusive parents overnight. There's usually something in their criminal history or their child history with, you know, Department of Child Safety history that you can use to support them. But yes, it's not that you've got to prove that they're trying to get you. It's that you've got to prove that they are not putting the children's needs above their own, and it's against the best interests of the children.
But if you don't have kids, you can also be going through this post-separation abuse. It's just lucky in a way that you don't have kids in that regard.
Yes, but it's still very intense, isn't it?
Yes.
All the rest of it still applies. I see it all the time.
Yeah. And look, if you are interested in the One Mum's Battle, she is onemumsbattle.com, and it's not a
I was going to say One Mom's Battle.
Yes,
she's great.
Look, she's really got it in there, and look, the court system is different in America as it is in Australia, and look, it's got its pros and cons for both of them, but it's the same pattern of behaviour that men and women are facing after they leave their partners. And if you're aware of it or even know, okay, they're doing some of this, perhaps maybe this is going to happen soon, you can be prepared as well. And don't feel alone, because there's a reason why this post-separation abuse thing exists is because it's happening to so many people. It's starting to be identified as a thing. So you're not alone.
You could turn it into a bingo game so it doesn't affect you so badly. You know, post-separation abuse bingo and see how they go.
You could tick it off.
It does make you feel better when you realise it's part of a pattern, because otherwise you can feel like you're in a washing machine with just one thing after another.
Or you feel like you're crazy.
Yes.
So it's really important that you know that you're not crazy. Get a reality check. Go and see a psychologist. Say, hey, I think I'm suffering from post-separation abuse. Here's what's happening. Here's this thing I found. I'm going to link it into the show notes so you can go to her website and have a look. But I thought it was an important day just to raise this issue, to know there's so many people out there that have reached out that are going through this, and it isn't okay.
No.
But you're not alone, and there are ways to deal with it. And I thank you, Mum, very much for your time today.
Thank you, Laura. Bye, everyone. Keep safe.
Bye, everyone. Take care. If you found this podcast helpful, we'd love it if you could rate, review and subscribe. By doing so, you are spreading the word to help someone else just like you. Lynn would like to remind you that this podcast is general advice only, and you should always get legal advice in relation to your particular situation. And remember that the Australian laws may have changed since recording.